Hey, what's going on? It's Johnny here. So, I was playing Battlefield 6 REDSEC. It's like the new Battle Royale mode that they got. And honestly, I couldn't get over how good the audio was for this fiery circle thing that goes around the map and destroys everybody. And after really listening to it, I came up with my interpretation is that there's 4 layers going on here that really, immerse the player. And before we dive into my Unreal project, here's a chart of where my brain's at. Here's the circle, here's one layer, here's a second layer, there's a third layer, and fourth layer. So take a good look at this chart, pause it if you'd like, and I'm hoping that by the end of the video, this chart will make more sense than it currently does right now. So let's hop right in. So this is where we're at. We just got like a blank level, we got a big floor, and we have this gigantic circle that's going around. That's actually a blueprint called Blueprint Storm Circle. I know, I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I was planning on like recreating this entire project from scratch, but honestly that would take so long and it would probably do more damage than good. I'd probably have to sit here and fix a bunch of bugs. So the way I'm going to do this video is actually just kind of show you what I did instead of doing it on the fly, right? This circle is just a blueprint that I call Blueprint Storm Circle. It's just going around. The static mesh is something I whipped up in Blender real quick, and I don't know what I'm doing in Blender, but I was able to make a ring. And the material is something I found for free on the Fab store. So yeah, basically, let's hop into the level and walk around. I wanted to first start off with the first layer, which is probably the most simple out of the 4 layers that I demonstrated to you in the beginning of this video, and that's what I call the rumble layer stereo. It's essentially just a stereo layer. Actually, why don't I just show you the asset, right? So I called it the base layer, rumble layer, same thing. I just basically wanted to make a looping stereo sound that doesn't really sound like fire. It sounds like a big storm, right? So that's what you hear right now. This is the first layer, and it's probably the most simple. It gets louder the closer you get to the ring, and it gets quieter when you get farther away. Set that up, that was actually really easy. Let's take a look at this Metasound. So all it's doing is we have a distance node that's going into a map range that's controlling the gain of the loop, which is right here. I hope that makes sense. I hope you guys have dabbled with making Metasounds so this chart kind of makes sense to you. So yeah, basically the distance just controls the gain. I did have a filter right here. I think that's just because I wanted to filter out some of the lows that were coming in off the sample. Don't forget, like, you can do some mixing within Unreal. In fact, I encourage people to do some mixing within the engine, because you never know when you pump out assets, like, if they're gonna fit or not. You never know how it's going to sound in the mix, and I've been doing some mixing within the engine itself just to balance things out, right? Anyway, we got the loop going out. Don't worry about this bottom half. That's actually going to be the radio static stuff we're going to get to later. Super basic though, right? Just controls the gain. So as I was making this, I quickly realized that it would be cool and also necessary to have some sort of like random spawner. So check out this gigantic rectangle that follows you around, right? It follows you around, it looks at you, and by looks at you I mean it rotates to face the player, which is very, very important. I realized that I'm gonna need some sort of object or just something to spawn the bomb one shots, which is the next layer I'm going to talk about, right? If we go to our random bombs, I should show you the asset first. So remember how I keep saying there's 4 layers to the storm wall, right? One of the layers is a randomized, it could be anything. In my demonstration, I wanted to use bomb samples. I got 4 bomb samples, okay? And what's gonna happen is, where's my rectangle at? What's gonna happen is, when the player gets close enough to the circle, I mean the ring, I want one-shots to be triggered within this rectangle right here. So, if you're standing close enough, I want things to be spawning, and you can already see things are starting to spawn here. It's a little messy, but I want things to spawn over to the right, I want things to spawn up, I want things to spawn in the middle, to the left corner, blah blah blah. It's a randomized boundary that things can randomly spawn in, and every time it spawns, it'll pick one of those 4 bomb samples. So I think randomization in this case actually goes a long way. And to make things simple, I have the bomb Metasound already set up. I just disconnected this line right here. So essentially what's happening here is that it just picks one of the 4 bomb samples, it randomizes the pitch, and then it throws it in within the bounds of this rectangle here, right? It also takes into account how far away you are. So I don't want to hear these bombs unless I'm close. So I'm going to get close. You can hear some of these bombs starting to spawn. And you know, it looks pretty goofy, and it may not make sense when you can see what's going on, but honestly, if you turn this stuff off and just kind of stand here and pretend that this is Battlefield, I think it makes a lot of sense, because it sounds like these randomized sounds are coming from behind the storm wall, as if things in the background are blowing up. And the best part about this is that they're getting actually spawned in the 3D environment. So if you turn around, rotate the player's perspective, it does follow the location of where they're being spawned. It's not really a stereo illusion. It's like these sounds are actually getting spawned into the environment. And that creates a lot of immersion. Again, that only happens when you're close, right? That's 2 out of the 4 layers. We got the bombs, we got the rumble layer stereo that just goes up and down based on distance. Similarly to the rumble layer, let's talk about the crackle layer, which is right here. Pull up the asset. All of these assets I made in Ableton Live. It's my DAW of choice, and just bounce them out. They're all loops. It's like a fire burning layer, right? Let's take a look at that Metasound. I already have it up. One thing I want to point out about this Metasound is you can see that I struggled down here to make this filter work. Honestly, let's just move that away, because that was a headache and it just didn't even end up working. I ended up doing what I needed to do via attenuation settings. So anyway, I just want to point out that I kind of creatively layered the same sample twice, right? So if you look at this, right, I got the fire burning sound playing twice at the same time, except I'm layering the same sound, -5 semitones and +3 semitones into the same mixer, and then within this mixer I'm balancing the volume on both of those elements. So for example, if I were to take away this lower layer, you'd only get the highs. So that's one of the many things, you know, you can do a million things with Metasounds, but one creative thing is just reusing the same asset twice, putting them at different pitches, and then like layering them into a mixer. So now that I have this back hooked up to the output, it should just work. Okay, now we can hear that crackle layer. And it's attached to the bounding rectangle. You can see it right in the center. We go back to our storm circle blueprint, right? The components, I attach this crackle layer to the bounding rectangle, which is invisible right now, but now you can see it. It's right in the middle. So in essence, that's going to follow you around. So just to recap right now, we got 3 out of the 4 layers going. We got that stereo. Okay, kind of weird with the rotation right now. I mean, of the box. One sec. This should be set to not visible. 3 layers so far. We get that rumble layer, stereo, which is that big storm sound. We get closer, we get that fire crackle. We get even closer, we get some random bombs starting to spawn in within that rectangle. Again, this rectangle will move with the player. So it gives the illusion of this like wall of sound. And by the way, thanks to big shout out to the sound effects guy. He's got this great video on making like a wall of sound. It's like basically an audio illusion, so that the audio component that follows you around, and it creates the illusion that this whole thing is emitting sound, when in actuality it's just one emitter that's getting moved around. Let's move on to our final layer, which, if you remember my diagram, it was the layer that only fires when you're in really close proximity. And considering that it's a 2D stereo sound, I actually just threw this into the Metasound I have earlier. The rumble layer stereo Metasound. Oh, I see why this isn't working. Let me hook this back up into the mixer. Essentially what's going on here is I got this asset right here. It's a storm circle radiostatic loop. Like I said, it's a stereo 2D sound that I made. It's just basically like, I was trying to make something that's like kind of alarming when you're like standing too close to the circle. So we got this distance node right here that's gonna turn the volume up so it's audible when you're really close, within 600 units to be specific. I also made another map range float for the pitch on the loop. So like, this is, we can do cool stuff like this. As you can hear, we're outside of the range to hear it, but we get in the range. Starts at a low pitch, pitch gets higher, volume gets higher as well. And we just hook this back up. Cool. So let's hear everything all together. Radio static turn fire. So in essence, this whole system is a blend of 2D and 3D sounds. We also have a random emitter that's going on here that we've set up in this rectangle. And now that I think about it, I probably should go to the event graph and show you how this works. Like blueprint wise, right? Event begin play. We have 3 custom events that get fired off immediately. the rectangle is found here. So move the bounding rectangle. That's the first event that we're calling. Right off the bat, we're going to set the rectangle location. Where do we get that location from? Well, if we pull up the storm circle, we get the closest point on collision. And we're also referencing the player's location that goes into the point, right? So we're referencing the player's location. It goes into the point pin right here. And we're also referencing the entire mesh of the circle. That's going to output a location that we're setting every time that this event is called. From there, I needed to do a little bit of math to make sure that this rotated or was spawned in the correct location. All I did was take the rectangle location that's being set right here, right? And then I split it and then did a little bit of math to make sure that this ended up in the right spawn point. Fine lookout rotation. Okay, now so we have the target coming from the player location, which is right here. Start point is coming from the rectangle location. Blah, blah, blah. Did a little bit of math, and that outputs the correct rotation. So like I said earlier, like picture this rectangle as like a giant TV screen. You want it to face you and not be pointed in a weird way, right? So that'll set up the correct rotation. On this script, every 0.4 seconds, I want this script to call itself again. Every 0.4 seconds, it's just going to start from the top, start over. So every 0.4 seconds, this rectangle finds the best new location depending on the player position and rotation. Not too bad, right? Not too bad. Hey, if I can do it, you can do it. I'm an audio guy. Similarly, we have the rumble layer stereo component moving around, and this time instead of being attached to the rectangle, it's just going to find the closest point on the storm circle mesh. I'm not really sure why I did it like this, but it works, right? Every 0.1 seconds, I want you to call itself and go back to the beginning. That's how we can establish the location of the rumble layer stereo component so that our distance node within the Metasound functions correctly, because that stereo component is actually being placed in the world. So we need to have that in the world in order for this node to work. Distance between listener and sound location in game units. It needs to be placed somewhere for this node to work. And that's what this script does. Move around the rumble stereo layer to the closest point on the circle. It does that every 0.1 seconds. Finally, this is probably the most complicated out of all the scripts. When this script is called, this is a random time interval for these one-shots to be spawned, right? Bounding rectangle. So we get we get the world location of the rectangle. We get the scaled box extent, so it's like the extent of the box. And then this node right here picks a random point in the bounding box to spawn a metasound. What metasound? The random bombs. So it just spawns one of these metasounds in a random area inside the bounding box. This right here is looking at the distance between the bounding rectangle and the player. And if it's, let's see here, I always get a little bit confused here, but if it's less than 3,000 units, aka it's close, if it's less than 3,000 units away, yes, spawn the metasound, right? And if it's not, or if it's equal to 3,000, like if it's greater than or equal to 3,000, then just try this script again from the beginning. And you can see that it's just going to keep trying. I forget that you can actually pull up the blueprint while it's running. You can see that it's just trying, but we're not close enough for that script to work. We're going to move forward a little bit, and now we're close enough for the sounds to be spawned. Oops, sorry about that gunshot. And yeah, that's basically it. So this is my first tutorial, so you know, I kind of do apologize about format being a little bit more of like an overview instead of a redo. If you catch my drift, like for my next videos, I kind of want to do it so I actually sit here and I reconstruct what I did from the ground up instead of just taking a look at the scripts, the Metasounds, and just breaking them down. I find it's more engaging if you actually just redo what you did. But again, I'm kind of a rookie here, and I tried to do the redo thing, and I created a lot more issues than I would like to admit. So, you know, there's a couple things I glanced over. For example, like attenuation settings. That's something you're just gonna have to play with and make sure it's sounding right when you do it yourself. So yeah, that's about it. Later.